You know, when there's a baby that may seem a little wiser beyond their years, usually people would say something like, that baby done been here before. Or even when there is a child that's older and they have these natural talents and skills, the adults may still say, that baby done been here before. But what if one of these talents that you notice in this child is being a seer? Would you trust the visions and statements of a 10-year-old? Or would that be another, that baby done been here before? Or would this be, that child done seen this before? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. A 10-year-old girl who at the time was a slave but had the gift to see far beyond her years. And this 10-year-old woman would soon grow to become known as the Hoodoo Queen. Today we are talking about the legendary Aunt Caroline Dye. Hello you all, I'm BlaqueWitchYaya. Thank you so much for tuning into this video, and thank you to this commenter here who suggested for me to cover Aunt Caroline Dye. So I'm really excited to share this story with you guys, and it all starts on one day while setting the table for Thanksgiving. Caroline was helping setting the table, but she kept insisting the entire time that there wasn't enough plates set on the table. So everyone's looking around, they're counting the plates, counting the people who's gonna come, like, okay, we got Shirley, we got Sarah, we got so-and-so. And they knew the number was correct, but Caroline kept insisting that someone else would come, and that someone else would be Mr. Charlie. She kept saying, Mr. Charlie's coming, Mr. Charlie's coming. Now you may be wondering, who is Mr. Charlie? Why is his presence for this Thanksgiving dinner so important? And this may seem like a simple correction, like, oh, maybe everyone forgot Mr. Charlie was coming and she just remembers. But Mr. Charlie was dead. Now, Mr. Charlie was the plantation owner's brother who was killed 4 years earlier in the Civil War. Or at least that's what everyone thought at this time. So later that night, when it was time for dinner, guess who came walking through the door? Mr. Charlie. So imagine everyone's reaction. You think someone is dead for several years and all of a sudden they just come walking through the door. That was of course everyone's initial reaction, and they were even more shocked looking over at Caroline like, okay, so how did you know this man was coming when he died when you were 6? So everyone's trying to figure that out, but first they need to figure out, okay, so what happened to Mr. Charlie? Where have you been this entire time? He shared that he had been wounded, taken to prison, and hadn't had the chance to come home until today. So everyone is happy to see him, but yet still a little confused on the inside, like, how did Caroline know he was coming? And this was just one of many instances where the strong gift of seeing was taking over this 10-year-old's body. So let's rewind a little bit to Caroline's earlier life, earlier than the age of 10. So born Caroline Tracy, she was born in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and like I said, she was born into slavery, so there aren't too many documentations about her. On her gravestone it cites that her age at the time of death was 108, which would put her birth year at 1810. However, several U.S. federal census forms in Jackson County from the year 1870 to 1910 estimate her birth year should be between 1843 and 1853. So there isn't an exact date, but we have a couple of ranges to go by. Although the birth date may be different depending on documentation, there is factual documentation that states Caroline and her 12 siblings was owned by a man named William from 1789 to 1841 and a woman by the name of Nancy Tracy, who was his wife, and they operated a plantation in Spartanburg. That honestly felt so uncomfortable to say that they were owned by a certain person, and the fact that there's documentation for ownership but not birth. But we're going to continue with the story. So after William passed away, William being the plantation owner that I mentioned, his wife Nancy relocated to Independence County in Arkansas with her children and along with the enslaved individuals that she inherited after William's death, which Caroline was a part of this number. And she was a teenager at this time. While living in Arkansas, she gave birth to her daughter named Hannah. Later, the wife Nancy passed away. Even though she passed away, Caroline still remained property of Tracy's estate until the Emancipation Proclamation freed her 2 years later. Now there is also another account that states Caroline was born on the property of a wealthy merchant by the name of Henry C. Dye, and she lived there until she was granted freedom in 1863. And in this part of the story, her future husband Martin died, was also enslaved on the same plantation as well, and that's how they met. So it's two different accounts, but they were both later freed after the Emancipation Proclamation. So what did Caroline do after being freed? She has this gift that she was able to tap into at such an early age. So once freed, she moved to Franklin County, Arkansas. There were several townships that were established for newly freed Black people. Caroline then settled in Newport, Arkansas, and this is where she gained her popularity as a seer. So with this popularity of being a seer, of course everyone's trying to book her. They're like, listen, when are you available? Let me know. But she did not charge for her services, but she was so good that people left her with monetary offerings anyway, or they would exchange some type of service for her service. For example, if they couldn't pay, they were offered to keep up her yard, to bring her food, to help out around the house. She was so good they felt guilty just walking away without being able to give her something. So, and like I mentioned in another video, you want to make sure you pay spirit somehow, some way. When someone is utilizing their gift to help you, don't think of it as, well, that's my homegirl, she always give me free readings. But you want to make sure that you're giving a thanks to that spirit. So even if you don't have money to pay them, but like, hey girl, I brought a bottle of liquor for your spirit, can I put it on your altar? Or you could use it to give them libations, like whatever. You want to make sure that you're doing something in exchange. Or like, hey girl, you doing me a reading, I could braid your hair this Saturday. Something, just because you want that flow to remain balanced. You don't want it to be where that person is continuously pouring into you spiritually while you're draining them. Do something in return. Even if you're leaving their house and like, let me take out your trash while I'm walking out. Something just to keep that balance and intention there. So with these donations though, and also the pension she received after her husband Martin passed away, she was able to purchase land and constructed rental properties not far from the business district of Newport. Now with this strong gift of being a seer, Caroline, who eventually became known as Aunt Caroline, and I'm going to refer to her as Aunt Caroline for the remainder of this story, she did not like being called a fortune teller, which I kind of get why in modern days, because a fortune teller sounds like real gimmicky. They have one of these crystal balls and everyone's just thinking that, oh my god, they're going to tell me when I'm going to die. Like I told you guys, my first encounter, like visually seeing a reading, was in the, I think it's called like a hip opera of the movie Carmen. The fortune teller told Beyonce, Carmen, in the movie that she was going to die, and I was like, oh my god, I would never get a reading. But it's usually not like that. So I'm assuming she thought it was gimmicky and simplified her gift too much. So many of her clients viewed her as a prophet as well though, and she didn't use tarot cards, crystal balls, or a pendulum. She didn't do any palm readings. She didn't use any of those accessories. But do you know who do use all of those things? Myself. And if you need some crystals, some incense, some herbs, some candles, some oils, whatever, you can get yours from BlaqueWitchYaya.com. Even if you don't use it, don't worry about it. But if you're like me and you just like things to be visually there when you're doing your rituals and spell work, go get you something from BlaqueWitchYaya.com. Aunt Caroline didn't need it, but you know, we may need it because we like the works, we like the theatrics, we like to be able to touch what we're working on. But Aunt Caroline usually received clients in a small, plainly furnished consulting room, though sometimes she could be found in her favorite rocking chair on the back porch. For the most part, she was able to just look at someone and tell them what they needed to know. But the times where she did use a tool, she utilized a regular deck of playing cards that she would spread out in front of her just to help her concentrate. Because you will notice sometimes with people who have a gift of seeing, they'll utilize something just to keep them focused, because in the moment when they're connecting with their spirit, they're receiving so many messages at one time. They just need something to keep them on track so they don't start talking about your relationship, but then they jump over to health without finishing the relationship. But then they jump over because they hear someone talking about your career. So to keep them on track, they just have something just to give them a roadmap to make sure that they're finishing their thoughts and finishing their messages. Because sometimes it can get overwhelming for readers. I am not a reader. I do not offer tarot readings. So if you see a fake page named BlaqueWitchYaya DMing you saying, Grand Rising Queen, I have a message for you, it's not me. But for people who do read, I always hear how sometimes it can get overwhelming when you're channeling that person. You hear an ancestor talking, then all of a sudden another ancestor is talking, then all of a sudden your spirit is telling you to tell something about that person. It can get overwhelming and jumbled. So sometimes like you'll see that these readers have something to keep them on track. They may tap their foot, they may say like, okay, I got you. They may say something out loud just to keep them focused, to make sure that you're getting the reading that you need. But for Aunt Caroline, majority of the people who believed in her abilities were of course black and white and indigenous individuals, as well as there are some people who even traveled over 400 miles to seek Aunt Caroline's wisdom. Some of the areas she helped with was finding lost relatives, lost pets, jewelry, being able to analyze someone's health just by looking at them, or guidance on what choices they should make with their family life or career decisions. But one area Aunt Caroline did not touch on was love, interest, and wars. which I appreciate because honestly, for me, when I get a reading for myself, I'm not trying to hear about no love life. Like, that's the last thing I want to hear about. But that's just me because I'm more of like, tell me about my health, my finances, my family. And I feel like she did this because she was adamant about not cursing people. And I feel that sometimes when it comes to individuals in love, desperate times calls for desperate measures. So they immediately want to try to captivate and hold on to the people that they love, where they have to use spell work or some type of craft. So she didn't even touch that in general. And it's said that she did this because she felt like even with war, some outcomes you shouldn't try to manipulate or try to seek a heads up on, because there is a lesson that needs to be taught in this process. So if you try to manipulate it or just try to get a little cheat sheet, you'll end up missing on an experience you needed to experience in the long run. But Caroline was still about her money though. Even though she didn't charge, she didn't touch on the love life area, which is typically the most popular area people want to get a reading on. But while you're sitting there getting a reading, she got a couple pots on the stove, because on your way out you could buy you a plate of soul food, because she would cook up these big meals before she starts her day with readings, and after each person they were able to pay and fix them a plate of food while feeding the soul and feeding the stomach as well. So a lot of people knew her and they utilized her service. But of course, with seeking a gift like this, there are still individuals who prefer to keep this private. So a lot of people appreciated her gift and at the same time would request her not to tell anyone that they stopped by, even though I'm sure everybody knew that everyone was going to Aunt Caroline because she was so popular. But that's still the same to this day. There are a lot of people who don't even want to show up to a botanical shop in person to get a reading because they're afraid they're going to run into someone. Specifically, I hear people being afraid of running into someone from their church, like, oh, I don't want them to see me going into a botanical shop, I don't want people to see me doing this, or I fake like I don't like it to the public but I really do it behind closed doors. So even to this day, people still try to hide it. Even though they wanted to hide it, people were still going to Aunt Caroline because she was so good. She was even able to give specific details during this reading, which I feel like is very rare for some readers to do. I feel like you really have to know what you're doing and have that skill to give specific details, because I'm not sure if you guys get a reading and it just feels so general, like, okay, anybody could have said that. Oh my gosh, I have a decision to make. Everybody watching this video has a decision to make, like I always say. But there are few who are so specific, it's like they can just jump in your body and see through your eyes. According to a historian by the name of John Quincy Wolfe, she helped a man who lost his hogs. Now this may sound simple, but them hogs are money. So this is very serious. And she told him, you didn't lose your hogs. Your hogs were stolen. Go down the road to the 5th house from you and go back to the barn. You'll find your hogs in the stable, unlatch the door, and leave it open. Your hogs will come home. Don't go today though, because the people who live there are home, but tomorrow they'll be gone for the day. So you go tomorrow. But even with the gift so strong that she was able to tap into, and it was proven that her information was accurate because that man hogs did come home, there were people who still mocked her gift and even mocked people who went to her. That's why a lot of people wanted to keep it in private. But those were the same people who would seek her in private and ask for business advice. There were even politicians and government officials who would be like, hey, where Aunt Caroline at? Okay, tell her politician so-and-so needs to speak to her, okay? They would consult her, but in private, because they're like, oh my gosh, y'all go to Aunt Caroline? That's crazy. So Aunt Caroline, you said I need to say what during my speech again? But Aunt Caroline took this as a challenge. If she knew someone mocked her or didn't believe in her gift, she would give them a reading right there on the spot. And of course, her information would be so accurate that they would be a believer afterwards. So it was fun to her. It was like a sport. Like, it was like, oh, so you don't believe in my gift? Well, who's Gregory? Who's Gregory Franklin? Your father, right? Yeah, he's speaking to me right now. He called you little peanut, didn't he? She would just get so accurate to the person's like, wait, okay, hold on. It was reported by one of her servants that a man came up to her needing help to find his mules. Why everybody missing animals, I don't know. But he didn't really believe in Aunt Caroline's gift. He's like, listen, I'm trying to find my mules. This is my money. Y'all up here telling me to go to some psychic lady. I need to find out where these mules at. I ain't got time for it. But he eventually went after being convinced. So right there on the spot, Aunt Caroline told him, you don't think I could tell you where your mules are, but I can. Go down to the Tuckerman Road, about 4 miles, till you come to a big holler. They got a lot of timber in that holler. Go up the holler till you hear your mules braying. They'll be locked up in a barn, but on the near side of the barn, there's a foundation block. And on that block, you'll find a key. And of course, the man followed her instructions and there were his mules. She's able to describe a place that she never even went to before. She just gets these visions and she's able to guide people accurately. So on top of providing a service of readings and a plate of soul food, she was also a root worker, healer, and conjurer as well. She would use the Bible, mojo bags, ingredients from nature to heal people. So in one interview with a woman by the name of Madame Collins of Memphis, Tennessee, she stated that Aunt Caroline actually helped heal her cousin Lou, who had been poisoned and couldn't find a cure, and Caroline used rattlesnake dust and turpentine and gave specific ritualistic instructions for Lou. And in her final instruction, she told Lou to face the east and say, "Lord, here I am, take all my troubles and heal me in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost." And you may be thinking, in the name of the who, what, and huh? That sounds like some Christianity stuff, but she was a root worker. So let me explain. Caroline believed in God, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost, so her root work incorporated Black Baptist teachings. Usually the Hoodoo tradition most see God as the head conjurer, and his prominent followers from the Bible, like Moses, are believed to be Hoodoo practitioners. So this is just in some beliefs. Not all people who participate in Hoodoo believe this, but this is just specific to this story and what Aunt Caroline believed. And most consider Moses the finest Hoodoo man in the world, and they view the Bible as a book of spells, specifically the book of Psalms. And most people who participate in Hoodoo consider the Bible the greatest book of conjuring. So I want to remind you all, on top of having a booming business of reading people, she's selling soul food plates, she's providing healing services, she's getting rental properties, she's having multiple businesses. She is doing all of this while not being able to read or write, not even her own name. But her gift of seeing took care of her while she lacked in those areas. Like I said, she was born into slavery, so with education, she mainly had her voice, and in this case, her visions as well. And she was able to use this gift to help others and create a prosperous life for herself. Now, Aunt Caroline may not have been able to read or write, but that didn't stop people from writing about her. Mainly in blues songs, she was mentioned in several blues songs, so much to the point that some songs that were written after her death had people questioning, when did she die? Because they were singing of her as if she was still around and they had recent encounters with her. Will Shade and the Memphis Jug Band performed a song titled Aunt Caroline Dyer. They spelled her name wrong in the song, but the lyrics of the song speak of a man going to Newport, Arkansas to seek Aunt Caroline's skills. She was described as a fortune-telling woman who can whip him up a mojo bag so that he can strut his stuff around town and not live so rough. She's also called a two-headed woman who can raise the sick, break spells, and possesses powers far greater than the Seven Sisters. And we have a video coming up about the Seven Sisters. Johnny Temple also wrote his 1937 hit Hoodoo Woman about Aunt Caroline. The lyrics call her by name and speak of him standing on a mountain in Jerusalem, Arkansas, and then going to Newport, Arkansas to seek a mojo bag from Aunt Caroline. September 26, 1918, Aunt Caroline passed away. Her gravestone says that she was 108 years old when she died. Her farmland and rental properties amassed her a substantial amount of wealth, especially for a Black woman with no formal education in the South. A probate was filed on August 15, 1918, which suggests that Caroline suspected her death would come soon. The will she wrote stated, "She had no heirs of my body. The majority of her land and money was to be divided between Irene Atkin, a child that she adopted, and Mac Griffin, a nephew. She placed her long-term friend, Irwin, in charge of her rental properties while still holding on to Irene's trust because she believed her nephew would just squander all the money. Caroline's daughter, Hannah, isn't listed in any of the census forms or in her will, so people assume that she may have died as an infant before the Civil War ended. Also, large stacks of cash were found in Aunt Caroline's home. They said that she did not trust banks, so she just buried her money around the home. And there were whispers that she also had gold hidden in secret places around Newport. So of course this caused a stir. People flocked to the city and searched for decades, but nothing was ever recovered. So that is the story of the Hoodoo Queen, Aunt Caroline. And I love how Hoodoo is a spiritual tradition and practice, but depending on the family that you're from dictates what you would believe exactly or what you utilize in your work. But with all these differences, there still is a line of cohesion that ties everything together. Also, I like in this story how Aunt Caroline was not able to read or write, but her spiritual gift was able to drive her throughout life. Even though she may not have the physical skills that are typically needed for day-to-day operations and to bring in money, she was able to grow off of her spiritual gift and help others. And I feel like even in general, when someone is not able to tap into a sense, the other senses are enhanced. Like if someone isn't able to see, they may have a stronger spiritual eye. They're able to hear better. Their spirit communicates with them louder because the energy that was meant to go into sight is now going into other areas. And it may heighten their intuition, because where one area lacks, it just makes the other area stronger. So I feel like this is the same with her not being able to read or write, but it made her visions and sight even that more accurate, because that's what she had to depend on. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this story. Let me know who I should cover next, but like I always say, as above so below, as within so without, as the universe so the soul. Until next time, you guys, Ashe, baby.